In 2016, the Minnesota Timberwolves had one of the most dynamic young cores in the league. Led by two former Rookies of the Year in Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins, even dubbed the next Kobe and Shaq, they were primed to take over the league. Also joining them was Zach Lavine. Lavine, primarily known for his dunking, was just starting to make legitimate strides as a scorer and shooter. All three of these guys were less than 23 years old and already the three best players on the roster. Coached by Tom Thibodeau, someone who up to that point had a solid start as his head coaching career with the Bulls, if you don't count his rotations. But with the three young prospects, two of them had already won Rookie of the Year. The Timberwolves were going to be the next dynasty and finally bring a championship to the Twin Cities. But now it is 2021. Minnesota has a completely new core and one first-round exit to show for it. Lavine has reinvented himself into a star player, and Andrew Wiggins has reinvented his whole career, but this time in the Bay. Let's look over the progression of Minnesota and what went wrong with the Timberwolves. Statistically, the 2016-17 season looks great. Wiggins has one of the best seasons of his career, averaging 24 points per game on 47% from the field. Karl Anthony Towns also took a leap on only his second season, averaging 25 points and 13 rebounds. Lavine too had also made a jump, going up to 19 points per game. He also expanded his shooting to where he made a whole nother three-pointer per game on the same efficiency. While things were up for the three, the team as a whole did not see the same story. They finished 10th in points per game, but also had the third worst defense in the league. Shocking given how Thibodeau has the reputation as a defensive-minded coach. But this is also where the holes in their games became more noticeable. Wiggins notably suffered from Kobe wannabe-itis, mostly seen through his jump shot game. As we're coming out of college, Wiggins was not seen as too much as a shooter, but rather a physical, interior scorer. He based the majority of his game on the mid-range shot, despite being an incredibly inefficient shooter. He usually would only make about 1/3 of his mid-range shots he takes, which is an awful efficiency. What also didn't help Wiggins is that the league was under a rapid development where we quickly saw the end of the mid-range game in favor of the three ball. Not to mention, it was also incredibly disappointing for someone as physically gifted and athletic as Andrew Wiggins to be settling for jumpers rather than attacking the rim consistently. Wiggins played like he wanted to be Kobe, trying to hit the tough mid-range shot in the face of the defender. In reality, Wiggins did not have nearly the shooting ability nor the mentality of the Mamba. This also makes that point where he made that shot fading over Kobe, such as how Kobe faded over MJ, look even more ridiculous. The most gifted of the three, Karl Anthony Towns, looked like a near perfect center, shooting 36% from three, being an excellent down-low scorer, and can space out the floor from everywhere, even being a pretty solid playmaker for his position. But early in his career, and even now, Cat has struggled on the defensive end. Even now, he is hardly considered an average defender for a center. Finally is Zach Lavine. Lavine was seen as an extreme athlete, but not having a reliable jumper or any defensive promise. But as I mentioned earlier, Lavine started to hit his stride as a shooter and a scorer, but a torn ACL ended his season short. But Minnesota was not the only team struggling that season. After winning 41 games, the Chicago Bulls slipped into the playoffs as the number 8th seed, losing in 6 games to the Boston Celtics. After contract disputes and the Bulls failing to put a team around him, their new young star, Jimmy Butler, had requested a trade. Minnesota, tired of missing the playoffs, were looking for a new star to build their team around. The Wolves traded Zach Lavine, picks that would later become Larry Markkinen and Chris Dunn, to the Bulls for Justin Patton and Jimmy Butler. In 2 seasons with the Timberwolves, Butler appeared in 69 games. Nice. In his first season, the Timberwolves were successful, at one point being the number 3 seed until a knee injury would make Butler miss a large part of the season. But in dramatic fashion, the 8th seed came down to the very last game of the season between the Timberwolves and the Nuggets. By perfect chances, the last game of the season was against Denver, where both teams had a record of 46 wins and 36 losses. It would take overtime for this one to end, but eventually Minnesota would end their playoff drought, defeating the Nuggets. However, they didn't do too much with that as they were kicked out in the first round. The next season with Jimmy Butler was supposed to continue the success that Minnesota saw in the first one until one infamous October practice.
Curse these forsaken Twin Cities! Pray me!
Remember last season we were a 3 seed before he got hurt.
Curse this wretched house! Pray me!
Jimmy Butler and the third stringers defeated the Minnesota Timberwolves starters. The whole time, Butler was trash-talking and calling out the starters. Butler, along with Patton again, were traded from Minnesota to Philadelphia for Jared Bayless, Robert Covington, Dario Saric, and a second-round pick. That quickly ended that Butler era in Minnesota. Cat continued to progress, putting up similar stats as to what he did the years prior, but Wiggins was beginning to show a different story. Ideally, Wiggins playing alongside Butler would make him a more efficient player, allowing him to worry less on creating offense, putting more into his defensive game. But in the one full season with Butler, Wiggins struggled as he averaged almost 6 less points per game with worse shooting splits across the board. It also doesn't help that Andrew Wiggins recently got a max contract, something I'm sure would not go back to bite the Timberwolves. Even after Butler was traded, Wiggins continued to struggle, and he was not the defender he was supposed to be. He was awfully inefficient, and he was by far away a follower of Kobe. By the way, how was Zach Lavine doing?
Chicago's got it! Oh, no! You're kidding!
From the Timberwolves, and Zach Lavine had blossomed into a star. Not just dunking the ball, but creating his own shot, shooting the ball from deep, and even making plays for others. Even Lowry, Markkanen, and Chris Dunn not being the best trade pieces back for Butler, even with them, the Bulls seem to have won this trade. Next marks the 2019-20 season, marking what would be Wiggins' last season with Minnesota. This would be another forgettable season for the Timberwolves as the team went 19-45, finishing bottom 10 in both offense and defense. Karl Anthony Towns was one of the few bright spots on the roster as he did reach up to 26 points, 11 rebounds this season. Wiggins had a typical Wiggins season, inefficient scoring while putting up about 22 per game. His shooting from all levels of the court led much to still be desired, even if he was starting to show some signs of improvement defensively. I don't know if it's just me, but I don't think most of us actually expected Wiggins to remain on the Warriors roster. I think a lot of us just saw Wiggins being bought out or further traded away from Golden State. But it turns out Steve Kerr came out as a big fan of Wiggins, seeing the defensive potential he had and believing he could fit into their system. After the trade, Kerr said, "Andrew Wiggins is one of those guys who can fall out of bed and get 18 points just because of his ability to run the floor and get easy buckets." While a bit confusing at the time, this trade was the best thing to happen to Wiggins' career. Giving him a new city, new culture, and the backing of new fans, we saw a new Wiggins emerge. While the Warriors only made the play-in tournament last year, this was arguably the best season, if not the most important season of Andrew's career. Wiggins shot 38% from 3 while making 2 per game, the best of his career. He'd also had the best season efficiency-wise, where he had a true shooting percentage of 56%. Defensively, this may have been Wiggins' strongest season, and his playmaking wasn't too bad either. And that leaves us to where we are today. Lavine, since leaving Minnesota, has blossomed into a star, with the new-look Bulls likely to make the playoffs. Wiggins has proved himself in Golden State, and with the return of Klay Thompson, they may even be a contender this season. That just leaves Karl Anthony Towns. He does have a new core with D'Angelo Russell and Anthony Edwards, but even now, we know that Cat is not 100% happy in Minnesota. As he enters into his mid, almost late 20s, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw him trying to move on. Time will tell if Minnesota's new core will be anything better than the last. But if the last 20 years of the Timberwolves shows us anything, Minnesota has a repeated history knowing nothing but pain and dysfunctionality. And that is how the Timberwolves went from having one of the most exciting young cores in the league to having a completely brand new team with players branching off, becoming stars after leaving the Timberwolves. That's it for this one. If you liked the video, hit the like and subscribe button, and I'll catch you guys later.